Okay, so good morning, everybody. And thank you for joining us at this symposium, the African Animal Breeders Network Symposium. My name is Chinyere Ekini-Jivenu, and I'm a scientist, statistical geneticist at the International Livestock Research Institute here in Nairobi, Kenya. And I'll be moderating today's session as we discuss how the AABNet, so that's the African Animal Breeders Network, which is a platform of highly knowledgeable and influential professionals in the field of animal breeding, how that platform can be used to advance livestock genetic improvements on the African continent. And so in this session, we would have two presentations, and then a Q&A session, and then closing remark. So to start us off, I would like to invite Professor Apollonier Jikeng, Director General and Senior Director for the Livestock-Based Systems of the CGIAR, Honorary Professor at the University of Queensland, Centre for Animal Science, Australia, Professor at the Roslin Institute, the University of Edinburgh, UK, and Distinguished Professor at the University of South Africa. Apollonier, you're welcome.
Thank you, Chichi. Good morning to you all in the room, and good morning to colleagues who are online. We are here almost towards the end of the CGI inaugural Science Week. It's been a very good opportunity for us to connect as collaborators and to talk about the things that we've done and also explore opportunities. This session is dedicated to the African Animal Breeding Network. And I would like to start by acknowledging people. You know, it's really a network that was recently established, and we're very proud of that network. Institutions, let me first thank ILRI, the International Livestock Research Institute, for, good morning, please come in, for really supporting the establishment of this network. From ILRI, there were people like Okeyo, Moy, Julie Ojango, and the rest. So I think ILRI has been in this very, very strongly. And beyond the two that I've mentioned, Christian Tiambo at ILRI has also pushed on that really, really hard, and Chinyere and the rest. So I also want to thank the University of Edinburgh for supporting the early discussions of the establishment of this network, and the Scotland Rural College for really supporting as well. You recall that our first meeting was in Ghana. That was 2018. 2018 in Ghana, a number of people got together to start thinking about how we could be serious about building capacity in animal breeding in Africa. And we had people in the room, Ed Rege, Misek Chagunda here, and Victor Olori and many others, Sami Agre, all those people were in the room, and many more. So it was a vision at the time for something that we did not know how it's going to look like. But I think that vision has come through, and recently we have published a paper in Nature Genetics, really articulating that vision going beyond us. But the period, the interim period between the meeting in Ghana and publishing this paper, Egerton University here in Kenya has been very supportive. In fact, they set up a whole office at Egerton University to help us start doing some work under umbrella and within the umbrella of AABNet. A lot of things have been done, and I think Misek and Raphael will be able to share that with you. But I also want to touch on the context in which we're trying to do this. Why are we doing this? The livestock proposition in Africa or in the global south is very clear. We all know the place that livestock plays, very, very important. But what are the challenges, you know, preventing us from maximizing on the opportunities that the livestock sector brings? We have things like animal health, we have nutrition, we have husbandry, we have the right policies. But one thing that we often neglect is really genetic improvement. In the global north, you can see how much gains have been made. You know, in Europe, North America, Australia, advanced economies, those gains have been made primarily because of genetic improvement and sustained genetic improvement. And I think this is what we're trying to do here. But we're not doing it from the blue. We're doing it from some of the work that ILRI and partners have been doing here. On this, I want to talk about the African and Asia animal dairy genetic gains, which has been really a blueprint demonstrating that it is actually possible to increase genetic gains in sub-Saharan Africa or in the global south, where farms are not really well structured the way you will see in the global north. I think it has demonstrated that it is possible. AABNet comes in to serve two main purposes. One is continue to build capacity, ensuring that people are well trained, well connected in countries where they are, and continue to collect the data and have access to genomic technologies and all other data, associated data capabilities. The second thing that AABNet brings is really to ensure that we can actually maximize on animal genetic resources that we have in the global south. Because if you look at genetic diversity in this part of the world, it's really plenty, but we are not maximizing on that. So AABNet is really set up, you know, to help us harness those capabilities or those resources. Let me close by saying that, you know, this network was also made possible because of the Center for Tropical Livestock Genetics and Health. And we have the director here, Professor Misek Chagunda. And I think it's a special appreciation to the center and to people behind the center. Many of them are in the room here. And I hope that the center will continue to champion this cause, not only here in Africa, but also in Europe, because the networks that the center has established are really important. So let me leave it here. And for colleagues who are online, thank you for enduring this delay, but I think we can now start. And thank you, Chichi, for giving me the opportunity to talk about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Apollonier. From his speech, we understand that this is a unique platform for the continent to advance animal genetic improvement. And to advance this discussion, I will be calling on Professor Chagunda. And he is a director, Center for Tropical Livestock Genetics and Health, CTLGH, and chair of Tropical Livestock Genetics, University of Edinburgh, animal breeding and quantitative genetics expert, and honorary professor at the University of Hohenheim. Professor Chagunda, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chichi, and thank you, colleagues, for being here this morning. Thank you very much, Professor Jikeng, for giving that very good introduction, because that takes out two of my slides already, which is really good. So what I intend to do this morning is to move on from that discussion of we have a platform and then start to really dig deeper into how this platform can be used to strengthen livestock production in Africa. I should acknowledge the contribution of a lot of colleagues that have contributed to this talk and the discussions, but specifically for this talk this morning, Professor Rafael Mrode contributed quite a lot in the discussions. Professor Olivier Hanote contributed quite a lot. And of course, Apollinaire Jikeng contributed quite a lot as well. So I would like to acknowledge their contribution to this talk. As animal scientists, one of the statements, which is true, and we hear it quite a lot, is more than 60% of the costs on any livestock farm are going to the feeding. So feeding and nutrition on any livestock farm costs a lot. And that's a true statement. But there is another statement that we don't hear a lot. And that is to say, wrong genetics on any farm is even fatal for that farm. It's too costly. So although on the running operations of the farm, nutrition is the issue, but actually on the strategic survival of the farm, genetics is key. Because if you have wrong genetics, you can try and do whatever you do in feeding, in disease control, the problems will not go away. How do I back that statement? I back that statement because we've actually seen time and again the fact that in Africa, for example, where we have a lot of diversity in livestock, we are still not harnessing that diversity into productivity gains. About 25% of people in Africa still face severe food insecurity. And I dare say, most of those are even the smallholder farmers that we rely on. It's not only about farming, even fisheries. The small-scale fishermen and fish women are actually the most vulnerable in terms of food security as well. About 50% of people in Africa are facing severe or moderate malnutrition and food insecurity. And we know that livestock could play a part in dealing with those problems. Why in a continent where we have that diversity, we still have these problems? It's because we are not harnessing that potential of these livestock. What I gave you were the statistics as we stand, but even projections into the future are still giving that kind of image. In which case, we know that it's not a problem that's gone, it's a problem that's here, and it will be there for some time, because 80% of all people on earth will then also be in Africa, where those problems are. So we need to feed those that population. And we need quality food for those people. We also know that most of the people will be going into the urban settlements, in which case the rural areas where agriculture and livestock production is practiced will have the responsibility to feed these populations. It's not just about feeding people, it's also about taking care of the environment. We know that wrong genetics in a wrong farm end up with a lot of inefficiencies, including methane emissions, including a lot of overuse or misuse of water, including the production of nitrous oxide from the production system, including losing a lot of the protein that's fed to those animals, going down into the water system, polluting the water, the underground water. In which case, there is really responsibility for us to transform the food system using livestock genetics in order to make sure that those inefficiencies are taken out of the system. We are talking about AABNet, the African Animal Breeders Network. Is animal breeding a new thing in Africa? It's not. Animal breeding in Africa has been taking place for some time. And I also know that there have been some very good research and papers, one of them by Professor Olivier Hanote, which has showed the immigration of cattle, for example, into Africa. But let's think about even just the past 50, 60 years post-independence in most of the African countries. Animal breeding and genetics has been used. One of the animal breeding strategies that has been used in most countries in Africa is importation. Specifically, if we talk about dairy, we've imported a lot of dairy cattle. The black and white Holstein Friesian, for example, has found itself on smallholder farms. It's a genetic improvement strategy, importation of genes. It changes the gene frequency in the importing population. We also know that we've imported even some tropical livestock. So successful cases like the Saiwa being imported into Kenya, which later has been exported back to India and Pakistan. The other breeding strategy that has taken place quite a lot. So before I go to the other one of the downsides of importation is the assumption that one size fits all. One breed is good for all environments. I love the Holstein Friesian. I did my master's work on a Holstein Friesian, my PhD on a Holstein Friesian. The only degree I have, which I did on an indigenous cattle, is my bachelor's. I worked on Malawi Zebu, but they have their own weakness. They don't fit into every situation, the Holstein Friesians. So that assumption really kills the whole issue of genetic gains, because we know there is a lot of G by E interaction, which has negative implications. So the genotype by environment interaction. The other strategy which has been used in Africa for some time is crossbreeding, which is not only in dairy cattle. We've seen crossbreeding in pigs. We've seen crossbreeding in goats. We've seen crossbreeding in chickens. It's to try and capitalize on the combination of production traits and adaptation traits. It works, but the question is, what happens after the first video generation? Do we continue upgrading towards one of the two, or do we stabilize the population? The weak side of that is we haven't in Africa really harnessed the power of crossbreeding the way it has been done in Brazil, for example, with the Girando, which is a stabilized population. One of the stable breeding programs that could be used is selection. But actually, if you go across Africa, and I would actually say, I have been lucky enough to go into a lot of countries in Africa. There are really very few established breeding programs in terms of selection. Some of them are done as experiments by a university or a research institution. Others are started, but then they are not continuing. We know that part of it is the investment needed in selection programs. You also need to record quite a lot. So all that limits the way we can do things. And I dare say, one of the problems that has been there in Africa in terms of selection programs is because there's been only one breeder in a country or one animal geneticist in a country. You can't run a genetic program if you are the only one. Of course, once in a while, we kind of meet people at meetings and they boast, I'm the only animal breeder in my country. No, we shouldn't actually be boasting about that. We should build capacity to be groups. We should be one of the many animal breeders in my country. And that's where AABNet comes in. So, because sometimes we are the only one, we are trying to use the blueprint that was developed elsewhere, more especially in the country where you did your PhD. You try and get the blueprint from your supervisor, bring it to your country. Doesn't really work very well most of the times. And that's why we don't find on the ground a lot of selection programs. So I'll come back to that because that's where AABNet is also trying to do some work. My clicker is boycotting. I don't know whether it's because it's frozen or because the computer doesn't want to listen. Let's try that again. Okay. So, like I said, some of those things that I just outlined are the weaknesses. There are quite a lot. We can spend the whole day here. But I just wanted to highlight some of the weaknesses of animal breeding in Africa. And that's where AABNet, the vision that Apollinaire Jikeng talked about, came in to see if we can drive these genetic gains together. So that's the vision. That's the aim of AABNet. That's the goal of AABNet. Why does AABNet matter? I know you've seen this slide before in other contexts. It's usually called, why do livestock matter? But I actually changed it a bit to say, why does AABNet matter? AABNet matters because it's not just about animal breeders and scientists getting excited about what they do. what we are doing could drive some of the economic gains that could be derived by countries from livestock. We complain sometimes that there is no political will to help animal breeding. We had a survey done in Africa, and it was published by Opola and others. One of the weaknesses that we found was that there is no political support. Yeah, politicians will not support anything that they don't see money in. We've seen that time and time again, including some of the currently man-made programs, or one-man-made programs that everybody is talking about. It's because of the economic gains, and we have to justify that. And that's where AABNet comes in. The other thing is we should not hide away from the fact that most of the agricultural producers in the world are smallholder farmers. If we don't support them in Africa, they will really be where they are for some time. We need groups of scientists to work together, to work with our smallholder farmers together, to co-create those solutions. Livestock gets bashed quite a lot for pollution. I alluded to methane emissions. Most of that is because of the inefficiencies from the production. So we blame animals for producing methane, but actually it's really blaming them for living, because naturally they have to produce that methane to live. But the problem is that it becomes a problem when it goes beyond a threshold which is biologically acceptable for that animal. Because if we take it to 0% methane, that animal will die. The hydrogen and carbon that is making methane in the rumen is there for a reason. It's there for a reason because it sustains the microbiome, which is very vital for that animal to ferment and utilize the feed that you and me cannot eat. This morning, most of us had breakfast. If somebody brought in a bag of hay to your plate this morning, I'm pretty sure you would be up in arms complaining. But the milk or egg you had this morning, yesterday or 2 days ago, might have been animal feed. That milk might have been hay or silage. The animal is able to convert that because of the microbiome. Now, if you reduce the methane to zero, you change the microenvironment in the rumen and you kill the animals. So we need to reduce, but we should be aware that it's a natural way in which animals survive. So AABNet is really there to help each other deal with things in a way that one will make economic sense, but also will make biological sense. Not only biological sense, animal breeding should be in the context. It should also make production system sense. In Africa, we have big variation and diversity of production systems. Although we talk about livestock crop mixed systems, even the crop livestock mixed systems in Africa are different because the major crops are different. If you go to Ethiopia, we'll talk about teff. If you go to Malawi, you'll not talk about teff, you talk about maize and groundnuts. If you go to Ghana and Nigeria, talk about yams as predominant staples. So even the crop livestock systems are different. And we need to do animal breeding in those different production systems. The context in which livestock are kept is completely different. I was in Somaliland 3 years ago. We all assume that camels are kept by men, but actually 70% of camels in that herd, although the man is herding them, those camels may belong to women. We can only have very reasonable breeding programs if we understand the social networks in those countries. And that's why local animal breeders are really key to AABNet, to understand the local environment and local production systems. Not only breeders, we need to be inclusive. Some of this information can only be gotten from social sciences. Actually, the figures I just gave you about Somaliland, I learned that from an anthropologist, not from an animal scientist. Now, what would happen if I went there with my animal breeders kind of chart and say, here is the ranking of the breeding camels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And all those camels that I've selected don't belong to the matriarch in that society. They will not be selected. because they have to be selected in the context. The matriarch has to be respected. Who owns those camels? So it is really important to understand the concept and the local environment in which these animals are produced. And we have a lot of variation in Africa, which no one animal breeder can do. We need a network of us to work together. As a matter of fact, animal breeding by nature is already a collaborative affair. So who are we to blow against the wind? We need to collaborate. This example here is an example of a breeding program in Baden-Württemberg in Germany. It also serves Austria. Now, although biologically speaking, animal breeding is collaborative, but even the business of animal breeding is collaborative. I brought in this example because the goal is to develop an animal breeding program, but actually in that whole program, they even have a whole big department on marketing. They have a department on animal breeding with a lot of animal breeders, but it's not just quantitative geneticists. They have people who are on data, herd book management, and all that. They also have people who are working on public relations. Because at the end of the day, we are in the food system. We have to breed for what society is looking for. And we can only understand what society is looking for by having people with expertise in public relations, including lobbying. And then they also have consultants who are now working on the actual animal breeding and dealing with records from farmers and all that. This example tells us that even the business of animal breeding itself doesn't only need quantitative geneticists. I'm one of them, quantitative genetics. I like that subject, but I know that I'm only one of the many people that should be involved in a breeding program. And that's where AABNet should be very inclusive and not just go for animal breeders. But what are the tangible roles of AABNet? One of them is the multi-country genetic evaluations. We realize that if we try and do genetic evaluations within country, yes, we may make progress, but there's some work which we did a few years ago using data from Kenya, South Africa, and Zimbabwe, which demonstrated very quickly that if we put those data together, the three countries, each one of them would win. It's a win-win-win. Yes, some traits in South Africa lost a bit, but we expect trade-offs in every endeavor. But at the end of the day, it was actually a win-win-win. So multi-country genetic evaluations should be one of the roles, or is one of the roles that AABNet is working on. Professional development. I alluded to the fact that sometimes you have only one breeder in a country. One of the problems we have is the fact that if you're a senior breeder in your country, you don't really want to sit together with a younger not in terms of age, but in terms of scientists in the same training course. How do we make sure that we can also do continuous development of existing scientists? So we should be thinking outside of the box in terms of capacity building. Yes, we can do the classical ones, which people like Professor Mrode are already doing. Through CTLGH, we are also doing a lot of training. But we should also think of peer-to-peer development, where people can actually talk to each other. And having a network is really important for that. Advocacy, awareness, and business development. Animal breeding, yes, it's a science, but it should be taken as a business. And that's one of the things that we really want to be doing in AABNet. Bring in the business acumen to the scientists in order to make sure that we can do things together. Yes, we all like the word collaboration. I've used it several times already. If you are doing a heat map of words used in my presentation, collaboration would be getting really red. But we should remind each other that actually it goes beyond just working together. It is about trusting each other. It's about appreciating each other. It's about acknowledging each other's weaknesses and strengths and working with that. We can only do that in a network like AABNet. And we want to promote that kind of thing. So these are the roles of AABNet that we are working on. What happens if we don't have AABNet? We'll go back again to the same situation we are, where there isn't a lot of genetic progress. We'll be there with no sustainable livestock production systems. A lot of countries in Africa are already importing livestock products, and that's losing the hard-earned foreign exchange. And we should not be contributing to that as animal scientists. We should be contributing to countries getting their foreign exchange. But critically, livestock are blamed for loss of diversity. When we talk about that, the biodiversity loss, we are usually looking at crops. I love crops. I love my vegetables. Actually, even the animals themselves are suffering from biodiversity loss. And if we continue what we are doing, some of those indigenous populations of chicken, of cattle, will disappear in our lifetime. And that's not really good. So we need really to come together to make sure that we can keep that. I alluded to the fact that animal breeding is a business. I've brought in this example here from New Zealand, deliberately so, because New Zealand is a small country. This example here, behind it is the map of the world. This is where the genetics of New Zealand are going in terms of livestock products. So it doesn't matter the size of the country. What matters is when you have a resolute goal for livestock production and making sure that you take livestock as a business. New Zealand are doing it. So collaboration is key and at the heart of AABNet. I want to leave you with this story here, because we are in Africa. I wouldn't have done this without if I were elsewhere, but we are in Africa. We have our lions. We also have another cat, which is very popular and famous, the cheetah. On average, lions live longer than cheetahs, on average. The cheetah spends a lot of its energy hunting alone. And sometimes when they find each other, they are fighting amongst themselves, killing each other. Lions hunt together, which means they end up with a lot of time, quality time, to lie down under trees. If you find a pride of lions in the afternoon, they are really just having a good time. If we work together, we will have quality time to think. I don't know if those lions are thinking, but at least if we work together, we will have quality time to think together and develop livestock production in Africa. If we are doing it alone, we'll spend a lot of energy and time trying to run all by yourself, and sometimes unnecessarily competing with your colleagues, killing each other's professions. Let's behave like lions and be the pride of Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, that was my introduction to AABNet. And this is the paper that Professor Jikeng alluded to. You can download it. It's in Nature Genetics. It's describing most of what I've just talked about and also even more. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so very much, Professor Chakonda, for that insightful presentation. From his talk, we understand that genetics is a key way to advancing livestock improvement on the continent. And next, we will listen to Professor Mrode, and he will unpack how. So Professor Mrode is principal scientist and professor of quantitative genetics and genomics, member of the technical committee of Interpol, auditor for the International Committee for Animal Recording, ICAR, and FAO IAEA consultant for the application of nuclear and genomics tools. Professor Mrode, you're welcome.
Good morning again, and thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation. And want to be looking at AABNet and AABNet as a data capturing platform, capacity building for multi-country African livestock genetic evaluation and sustainable gain. And in general, basically, we're looking at, I like the general broad theme under which we are making this presentation. It says, CGIAR, Livestock Biotechnologies, the AU Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. So in my talk, I'm actually going to be looking to the future. I'm going to look at where we are in terms of data capture, evaluations, and where we want to be in 2063. So in my vision, looking to the future, this is what I would like, and I believe I would like us to see in 2063. We have an efficient multi-country Africa livestock genetic improvement system. So that is the first part of what I would like to see in 2063. Delivering sustainable genetic gains underpinned with digital data capture system and technically competent capacity. That is my vision for the Africa I'd like us to see by 2063. So the issue that I'm going to address now in this talk is what role CGIAR, AABNet, and AABNet are playing now and for the future of this organization, all the babies they will give birth to. Maybe 2063, they might give birth to some babies. So I'm going to be looking at what is their role now, what I anticipate their role to be in the future. So the question is, why the emphasis on sustainable livestock genetic improvement system as we look into the future? Why the emphasis? I think Professor Shanguda already mentioned why genetics is important. It is important because improvements that are due to genetics, they are cumulative and they are permanent. And we have seen that over the years, as Shanguda also demonstrated, that it yields very huge economic returns. So this was a study done in the UK by Peter Eman and his team, looking at the benefits of genetic improvement in the UK over a period of time, and it is over what 2.something billion pounds. That is the amount of economic return that genetic improvement can actually bring. The important thing I really want to say is that this process is based on a well-defined pipeline and has three major interacting blocks, of which data capture and technical capacity are major components. And that is the very core of AABNet. So these are the three blocks that actually drive genetic improvement. So we have here the data system, and that is where CTH comes in, and also AADG. Then we have the evaluation pipeline. CTH and AABNet comes in here, and then we have the delivery. And supporting this evaluation pipeline is the evaluation unit and the research team. And this is where capacity development is very critical. These are the three interlocking blocks that actually drive genetic improvement. So first of all, I will look at each of those blocks. The first one is the data system. Why is the data system so important? It plays two important roles. The first one is it provides the platform for an efficient and systematic recording of phenotypes. That is the first role of the data system. The second one is also a robust system to turn that data into information and provide feedback to farmers. Those are the very two critical roles of the data system. And why this is important, because the data generated will generate information upon which farmers can make evidence-based decisions. It gives us the basis for us to understand the genetic basis of performance, and therefore we can design breeding programs for improvement, conservation, and sustainable utilization. The data platform, we can use it to monitor, improve efficiency, monitor the feed officers, how our AI officials are actually performing. And above and as well, it provides an efficient link between the various actors in the value chain. That is how critical the data platform is. However, the reality is we find that in the smallholder system, we do not have the data platform performing these efficient requirements. So the consequence is farmers have limited access to information, so they are not able to extract the optimal benefit from their data. There's no systematic and sustainable breeding program, which Professor Shangoda have already mentioned, and access to various services and inputs are inadequate. So given the challenges of the small and dispersed heads of the smallholder in our low and medium income countries, the data system that we address these issues and must work must be technologically relevant. It must be affordable, agile, robust, and scalable, capable of functioning online and offline, has your reference capacities. So these are the, if we were to mimic what is already going on in the global north, it will not work. We need to make sure that we actually put a data system in place that have these relevant properties. And so that is where the African Asian Genetic Data Platform actually comes in, using three forms of technology, basically using the digital form to collect data and using genomics to drive improvement in genetic improvement. And basically in the very brief form, this is the component or the various component of ADGG platform. Right here, we have the database platform that does all the sort of work we like to do. We have an efficient system that actually collects the data that flows to the database. We have training materials all linked, getting information from the central database to generate the informations which are fed back to the farmer. Just to show you the presence of ADGG currently in Africa and also in Nepal. And we have captured over close to 3 million test-day records across these several countries. I will now move to the second block, building capacity. So as I said, in the future, I see a system that is supported by technically competent capacity. Why do we need to do that? Because the single function of the data system is to provide an analytical system that will actually turn data into information. And that information is fed back to farmers. And that is what drives improvement. This capacity, they must be able to define and implement genetic and genomic models. This is the capacity we need. Undertake research to underpin genetic evaluation models. So AABNet, CGIAR, AADG, they have been playing major roles in this area. So far, they have been building mostly individual capacity, yearly training over the last 7 to 8 years, visiting scientists to CGIAR, online access to training materials. And just to show you a broad coverage of the capacity building that have taken place, we've trained people from Kenya, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Malawi, Uganda, Rwanda, Cameroon, South Africa, India, Nepal, and so on and so forth. So it has been an elaborate capacity building exercise. And recently, and I think this is one of the most interesting developments, CGIAR, working with SRC, we are developing what is known as the Africa Genetic Evaluation Service Agents. It will be hosted initially by ADGG, and ultimate home is AABNet. And this system is building, this is ADGG platform. We get data, we clean it, we do genomic prediction, we release our board result. This agent is replicating this system. It will be hosted by ILRI and then by AABNet. Why this is important? It is hosted there. Any country in Africa, and I mean any country, using web interface can prepare their data and analyze their data on their own using this system in place. And I think this is one of the major development in terms of the future within AABNet and CGIAR and ADGG. Actually, now it is not that I'm actually going to talk. I'm going to be looking at what do I expect AABNet to do in the future? What do I expect CTH to actually do? So far, I've just reviewed what we've done, but this is my vision. This is what I'm actually looking for in the next years. The future of our data capture will have digital tools that provide farmers with real-time actionable insights. That is where we must go. We must develop digital systems that will provide real-time actionable insight to the farmer in terms of reproduction, health, nutrition, and milk production. The digital system should link various actors, the feed producer, the milk processor. There should be interaction. They should be able to predict, for instance, when milk will be more, when milk will be low, and therefore be able to make adjustments. And of course, we are in the age of AI. So I'm thinking, and I believe there will be new technologies using AI to add more value to what we're already doing. And advances in sensor technology and imaging mapped on digital tools. This is my vision of AABNet, ADGG in terms of digital tools. And Professor Kuta make a statement that we can do so much in terms of training capacity, but I think AABNet can do more. AABNet and CTH need now to move to build capacity at the institutional level. They should review curriculums of animal breeding department in Africa. We can do that now. We have the ability to do that. Review it and make sure it is broad and fit for purpose. Facilitate part of the curriculum online to be delivered. We have people to do that, and promote faculty exchange within Africa. There's no reason why we cannot do that now and continue to do that for the future. I'm actually looking at, which I already mentioned, that AABNet hosting a functional agents developed by CTIJ, providing a web interface for African countries to do their own national evaluation. And AABNet undertaking multi-country evaluation as an independent organization, just like Interpol. And I'm actually looking, we have many bright young people in Africa. You'll be very surprised how bright they are. And now I'm looking for AABNet organizing hackathons with participants working on ideas, solving specific problems related to African data structure, issues, and focusing on innovation and creativity. Bringing a group of young people together for 2 weeks, give them a problem, give their computers, feed them, and give them the problem to solve. And you'll be very surprised what they will come up with. I'm looking forward to AABNet having a satellite center in several regions of Africa, providing training and providing support on an ongoing basis. And I really want to see this AABNet working universities across Africa to secure international funds to undertake relevant research with African focus as well with international impact. So that is my future and vision for AABNet, ADDG, and CTIGH. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the three presenters for the very clear, engaging, and for me, very persuasive presentation this morning. So we have a few minutes for questions. After questions, we'll take a group photo for everybody in the room, and then you can go have tea, okay? So let's start. If there's any questions online, I think we can go with those first, and then we can come back to the people in the room. Most comments, yeah? Okay. Okay, so they're having conversations online. So we can start in the room. Any questions? Who wants to go first? Maybe I can, okay. two hands went up quickly, all right. So I'll start with, because you're closer. Okay, no, let me go first. Let me go first. I don't know this works.
Thank you. My name is Tezira Lowe. I work at the International Livestock Research Institute as a communications officer, supporting communications for the health program. It's not really a question, just inviting a comment. Anyone could comment on the issue of intellectual property management. You're talking about harnessing the diversity of livestock data across the continent. And I don't know whether AABNet is considering the issues in individual countries on intellectual property management, because the genetic biodiversity can be considered part of the intellectual property of that country. So how will you harmonize those differences across countries? Anybody can take that. Thank you.
Let me take the first part. So that's a real good comment. And if I may actually extend, it's not just about intellectual property as such. It's also about the heritage of the countries. And we need to appreciate that. There's a lot of indigenous knowledge that comes with livestock, the culture and all that. That needs to be acknowledged. Now, the flip side of that, though, is using tools like genomics and all that is also now really starting to demonstrate the value of these genetic resources to the countries. So there is part of, yes, we know the value already, but there's another part that is now being discovered because of using of the new tools. So that's the comment to your comment, but to kind of give insights to that, yes, AABNet and CGIAR and others, we need to think seriously about that. I'm happy to report that within CGIAR, we even have a lawyer who is amongst us, who helps us and keeps us on track with ethics kind of things, policy and all that. So yes, it's an area that we need to seriously think about and make sure that we don't leave it behind. Thanks.
Thank you, Chichi. Just to add, just a very quick one. So I think this is an issue that have been recognized, and within CGIAR, Christian Tambo, he actually handles this issue of data sharing, and all processes on making sure there's equality of sharing the benefits. And I think it's something that we have already recognized, and I think AABNet will actually work within existing organizations to have this sort of infrastructure in place and coordinate that across the various organizations. So thank you for raising a very important topic here.
Yeah, I just want to come back to the issue of intellectual property rights and access benefit sharing. I think those are very important instruments in place to support people access and benefit from their genetic resources. But if we're not careful, they become major blocks for us to actually do something. Sometimes we give the impression that if you keep your animal, nobody touches it, you're going to become rich. You know, it doesn't help. So you can find, you know, we're in Africa where we're even in situations where you have a breed of cattle in Uganda called Ankole. You have a very similar thing in Rwanda is given a different name. So what we need to do is really not just to be hung up with intellectual property thing. These are valid things that can be commercialized, but we flip that and turn those into opportunities to build capacity for people to understand what it is that we are trying to do. Because in some context, you say, okay, data sharing, put data accessible by everybody. Sometimes you give access to data to somebody who doesn't even know what to do with the data. So we have to build capacity, bring people to have very similar levels of understanding. Then people can actually appreciate what those genetic resources and how they can discuss IP and things like that. So that's really what we are trying to do. access benefit sharing is important. The Nagoya Protocol and all those things are in place. But if we're not careful, they can even stop us from doing the important work that we have to do. We have to educate, we have to build capacity for the right people to be regulating things at the country level. And this is where we fall short. So I just wanted to bring this comment for us to know where we stand and what we can do to actually get people to maximize on these resources.
This works too, right? Does it work? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Boz. I really appreciate Boz's presentations. And my question is actually from Professor Mizek. He said the Africa we want in 2063. And from what Raphael has presented, the future that he wants to see, how can we, bring all the two issues? Because breeding requires time, breeding requires resource, but the time we have to have a prosperous Africa in 2063 is about 25 or 35 years. So how can we bring this to in one, and so that we bring impact in the ground? Because with the current AABNet capacity in terms of resource and also human resource, do you think we can achieve that target in 2063?
So the question is, do I think we can achieve that with the capacity we have by 2063? The answer is yes, we can. The long explanation to that is, if I take you back to what Apollinaire said earlier on in his opening remarks, animal breeding in some countries, and he specifically mentioned USA, UK, Australia, and in my example, I gave New Zealand. Raphael gave the example of the UK as well, and even put figures to that. The important thing is to take animal breeding not in isolation. We should be looking at the national goals. We should be looking at the national aspiration and then link animal breeding to the national goals. If we try to breed just because we are interested in breeding and create our own goals, yes, we'll be going tangential to what the country is looking for. So taking the Africa we want approach, that's the African goal, African Union and all that. But at country level, they also have national strategies. We should, as animal breeders, go into those national strategies, find out what do they really want to achieve. Because in some countries, yes, they are looking for volumes, but other countries, they have achieved volumes, they are looking for quality. So we should link to what that country is looking for and breed for that. Thanks.
Can I just add to that? I think what I'm actually looking at AABNet, I'm looking at AABNet as a facilitator, being able to link. So I know the current maybe staff and resources at AABNet are very limited, but I see AABNet as a facilitator. So for instance, like the AG is being proposed, that is will be accessible to any country that have one or two geneticists able to prepare data and use that data. So I see the future of AABNet really facilitating stuff, pulling stuff together. Not necessarily they doing the work themselves, but actually facilitating it. I think we can do that to achieve that goal.
Thank you. And I'll take the question online from Robert on Zima. So essentially, how can we popularize AABNet? Have we or do we plan to have an inventory status of individual countries' genetics and a deliberate strategy to bring all the scientists together to benefit from our collective synergies?
And also,
just start off, and then other people could come in. So we started off AABNet by actually a launch of AABNet, and actually that was well attended. Now I really also want to comment on that paper that is published. I visited my professor, Professor Robbie Thompson, about 2 weeks ago. He told me, I saw this paper and he wanted me to see how he can help. and he volunteered as many copies of free AS Remo to support AABNet. So what I'm just trying to say that there's a lot of information out there, but I agree with you that we know we used to have monthly seminars, and I think we will need to promote that more. Institute have already done an assessment of genetic resources in countries, and will publish a paper on that. So I think we need to summarize all this and then put them on the website. So there is a website, and I think we need to make sure that people are aware of that website. There's a lot of information there as well.
Yeah, just a very quick one before Apolline comes in. The other one is AABNet is member driven. Become a member. So visit the website and become a member. By doing that, then we can really start using our collective effort, Robert, as you said. Thanks.
And I can just, before Prof said, also, if you know somebody who's not there, pull them in. Yeah, so.
I have a question.
For your question, Prof was going to comment on this. Yeah.
No, I had a comment, but Raphael has already
Covered
mentioned.
it.
Yeah, I just wanted to, it's about the paper 2023. Waga and the rest, many of the authors are in here. It's really about the current state and future perspective, you know, looking at the situation, speaking to this question here. So Jen is going to post that in the chat, yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, I'm Tad Sonstegard, Exologen. My question is, does AABNet play a role in helping form policies about foreign genetics?
So good question. Currently, I think it is important I'm trying to make that AABNet will always be a facilitator. So currently, we're not playing that role, but at ILRI, we actually done a lot of work on that even with the Kenyan government. And also some of the research, we are actually written a research policy on that based on the work we've done at ILRI. And the people that did the work are also members of AABNet. So, but I think currently we are not actively doing that, but I think that's something we should push into.
Yeah, allow me just to add by saying, first, on aspect of genetic resources, ILRI also sometimes committed a book on the African cattle, for example, which is already trying to bring a catalog of what we have as important genetic resource of cattle in Africa. And I think something also is going on good. We are also working to bring back for pigs, etc. But regarding the aspect of AABNet in policy, AABNet is the convener for the African Seed Committee in the African Seed and Biotechnology Program. And for that, we contributed also, we have been contributing in the CADEP discussion, particularly for the development of the indicators that should be allowing to trace and track the development of animal seed in Africa and see how we can use it to achieve also the Agenda 2063 that we're mentioning. Thank you.
So just a quick addition to what Christian and Raphael have mentioned. So, Tad, to your question on AABNet and policies, I think that's the space AABNet can help provide an advisory role, advise countries what's really best for your production systems and things like that. Let me reflect on some things that Raphael, the AADGG teams have done. The bull evaluation in Tanzania and also in Ethiopia. What has been the impact? In Ethiopia, for instance, just advising the country that if you look at your bulls, your genetics, this seems to be the best, has saved the country nearly $1 million of importation of foreign genetics. So we're not about blocking anything coming into the country, but we want to advise the country to bring the right genetics so that they can really fit in the, and help solve the problem that they want to solve. I think that's the role that AABNet and AGENS, whatever we're discussing here should really help the country to do. Because that's also one thing related to what Misek has mentioned. loss of biodiversity. Some of this thing is because we're trying to displace, the genetic resources that we already have. So it's really not to play in the policy space, becoming a policy or regulator, but really bringing the evidence to support and advising the countries to make the right decision.
Any other questions in the room? Okay, go ahead, please.
Good morning, everyone. So my name's Mwape Mweni. I'm an extension officer, livestock extension officer from Zambia. And I traveled all the way to come and meet some great people that I've been following on LinkedIn. And I think you're doing a great job. And what's so interesting about the conversation is that we have a certain number of people who are interested in animal genetics and breeding, especially in countries like Zambia. But the problem is the level of knowledge and capacity and technology that is available. You find that if you looked at works that are being done in our country, most of it can be considered, to my perspective, as novice, and I think it cannot add so much to improve the livestock quality in the country. So the thinking is that looking at AABNet and the works that it intends or it's currently doing, how does it look, or how does it envision the issues of trying to help countries like Zambia to build capacity, especially among the professionals who have been there for a long time, so that they can also be mentors for the young professionals. If you come to Zambia, very little, maybe not little, let me say, very limited personnel or professionals who are actually animal breeders and geneticians. So how would the organization come up and help countries like Zambia and the others who are seemingly struggling to have staff and mentorship systems around that? Thank you.
All right, I'll go first. Prof is looking at me. I guess he's looking at me because he knows I'm half Zambian as well. I'm a crossbred. So what you said, Mr. Map, is really true. Zambia, just like a lot of countries in Southern Africa, we don't have a lot of capacity. But that's where AABNet will work as a facilitator and make sure that become members. And then we can actually work together in those capacity building programs. And also what Prof. Rhodes indicated, that some of that capacity is not just about numbers of people. It's also about the level of training and also what kind of syllabus and curricula they're using in the universities. By working together, we can really start building curricula that are fit for purpose. That would work for the Zambian Balotse cattle. That would work for the Zambian Nguni cattle, Ngoni cattle, and all that. So we need to work together to make sure that we build the right capacity for the countries. By the way, I'll be in Zambia on Monday.
Maybe just to add to that. So I think Zambia need to connect with AABNet, because we can only help you when we know when you are connected and we know what the issues are. And then some of the points you raised, whatever capacity you have, let's review what you've got, where are the gaps. And I say we can encourage, within Africa, faculty exchanges, or people delivering lectures don't have to be in Zambia now with all the facilities we have online. And you people, I'm sure there are people willing to come to Zambia to do that. And I think also we recognize this gap in Zambia, and I think actually your country is one of the countries we look into in terms of AADG in our future plans. But at this stage, it's just a future plan, but your country is one of the countries we're actually looking into, expanding into. Yeah.
Okay, just maybe one thing. Professor, as you come into Zambia, by the way, you're most welcome. because I'll travel on Sunday. So I'll try by Monday to link up with you. Then the other thing is, I think the opportunity when you're in Zambia, I think it's our current leader in the Ministry of Fisheries and Livestock, where I'm actually working, could be interested in the works that you're trying to do in Africa to improve the animal genetics. So ideally, if you need a meeting with especially our CEO for the ministry, I think that can be arranged. Thank you.
Thanks. We will take that invitation. Thanks. Yeah.
Can I?
Go ahead, and I'll take one more question and then that'll be.
I also meeting for the first time a great figure that is also interested into what you are saying. I'm sure Prof. Mulu would like to say something.
Is this?
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, I was thinking along the lines of the curriculum, the university curriculum reviews, but also the opportunity to partner with Beyond Africa, right? With so many people who are interested and who would benefit from the resources that this group has. The Africa-specific examples based on the progress that's being done here. We are interested, I've talked to some people in Addis, with the universities that have memorandums of understanding with ILRI to try and develop specific curricula that are relevant to the African context, but also that will bring resources and collaborations globally on this effort. So I think there's a lot of research progress, there's a lot of talent, especially in the area of genetics and animal breeding within the Africa context that will benefit many more scientists to become engaged. So I'm interested in an opportunity to collaborate with you, right? And to develop these curricula that Professor Raphael mentioned, to look at revising the curricula, coming up with collaborative opportunities for experiential learning. I also wanted to say I had the chance to visit Kapiti yesterday, and I think that there is an opportunity to develop future researchers that are undergraduate students that do research, interns that do research, that look at the systems that are available using the resources at ILRI. I think it would be a wonderful opportunity to come up with the future researchers, but also researchers that contribute to current efforts, where they can contribute. We are developing new innovators, new technologies, new researchers, but they're also contributing to data collection, data analysis, phenotyping. And so there's many opportunities that I'd like to work with you on this, and I thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.
So very quickly, thank you very much for that comment. Yes, the opportunities are massive. The other component that we haven't really talked about a lot are the commercial companies, both within Africa and also outside of Africa, interested to work in Africa. And that's a real big opportunity because the young people we are talking about, they have a lot of entrepreneurial mindsets, but you can't be an entrepreneur on your own. You have to learn and work with or be mentored by others who are doing it. So you're right. Opportunities are massive. It's not just in the academics, it's also in the commercial world as well. Thanks.
One other aspect to this is, yes, the entrepreneurship, the innovators that we all need with these SDG goals, but the mentors, and what great mentors are all these researchers in AABNet and across the different institutions for these entrepreneurs and scientists. And so we should all be engaged in mentoring the future, and that's something I'm very interested in. Thank you.
One more.
Okay. I just wanted to comment. She said there are opportunities. Professor Jakunda mentioned peer-to-peer learning. So actually, it's really good. So he said we can register as members. If we register as members, I'm actually a student right here. I'm one day maybe a researcher. So like he said, peer-to-peer learning.
So how can we get there? He said we can register. Let's say I'm a member. Will I be able to access, let's say I can talk to Professor Jakunda, other professors. If they're doing research, can I volunteer, see their work, help them get insights, such and such? Thank you.
Yes, so that's actually the beauty of becoming a member. You easily can link to people. If you're not within the room, it's difficult to speak to anybody who is in the room. You have to come into the room to speak to people in the room. So yes, become members and then you can link to people. Thanks.
At this point, we will call this session to a close. I want to thank everybody. It was very engaging and sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. Not to a close. Yes, to a close, but with a closing remark. And then we will take a group photo. Yeah, so Prof. Jikeng, please, with a closing remark. Yes, please.
Yeah. So we had a slow start and a late start. Apologies for that, but I think we've had a good discussion. We've been joined by some people that are important to be acknowledged. We have our board member, Lilin, who joined us. Then you can see, board member, the sort of things that ILRI is doing at the detail level. So we're very proud that you've managed to come. Mulu, thank you so much for choosing to do your sabbatical at ILRI and connecting with us. So you're always welcome, once at ILRI, always at ILRI. And I think we are going away from this session with some of the questions and comments that would warrant, a bit of a shift of how we do things. And I think I'm very delighted to see young people here really interested in being part of this. So I think on the website, we can create opportunities for you to connect, to be a member. And then, we have to decentralize this and get people at the counter. You don't have to come to Nairobi to talk to me, to Christian, go to Edinburgh to talk to Misek or Raphael. So wherever you are, we can even come to you, to see things at the country level. I think from the session, I want to share 10 key messages that I've noted. The livestock sector has the opportunities and the challenges that we've heard. I don't want to repeat that. I think we have to look at the livestock sector as a component of agriculture, which is driving an important part of agriculture. We should not always talk about agriculture. We go to crops and things like that. We bring livestock because livestock can actually help to have better crops. And the second one is really the area of animal breeding is important. We're not trying to do that for the first time in Africa. Other parts of the world have done that. They have demonstrated that they can build prosperity, they can drive the sector and things like that. The third one is capacity and capabilities. You can build capacity and fail to have capabilities to do things. We're building capacity in countries, but we should also try and move towards capabilities that exist in the country for people to do things. Because if our capacity building is always about people moving from their country to go be trained somewhere, I think we're not doing it right. There are certain things that you can go somewhere to do it, but we should also create capabilities for people to do things in the country. Point number 4, we've mentioned few institutions. We've mentioned CTLGH, we've mentioned AABNet, which is the main topic of what we are trying to discuss here. We also mentioned AGEN, the African Genetic Evaluation Service. And when Prof. Morode started talking about that, you could see that the tone, the smile, and everything, the energy change in him. Because I think that's the vision, the opportunity, and the promise that we do have. I think launching animal genetic services, evaluation services in Africa will be a big thing that we can do. The UK has made considerable gains through what AGEN does. And the person sitting in front of us is one of the big brains behind that thing. Really convincing him to do that for Africa, I think, is a big gain. It's for us now to really take that forward. The next thing is about investment. This is point number 5. It's about investment. We can do all this, but if we don't have the resources, to drive this agenda, we are not going to go anywhere. It's therefore my call for people who are able to influence the system, write proposal, make available some resources. I think it will help us to move. The next one is about what we are talking about at the nexus of policy and advisory services. We have to become champion. Thank you so much, gentlemen from Zambia, for really already creating an opportunity for MISEC to meet somebody at the ministry. This is how we're going to influence things. We have to take knowledge to those who need the knowledge and make some decisions based on that. Point number 7 is about people. We can do all this if we don't have the right people, it's not going to work. We're talking about animal breeders, but animal breeders are not going to solve the issue themselves. We have to bring the farmers. We have to bring people in cooperative. We have to bring people in other disciplines to be part of this. Research and development is something that we shouldn't forget. We're here again trying to feed the pipeline, get innovations into this pipeline. Mrode talked about getting young people doing hackathon. That's for me some aspects of research and development. How can we drive innovations for people to do things? Point number 9 is about intellectual property rights and also Nagoya Protocol, access benefit sharing and things like that. We should really be proactive, ensuring that when we talk about IP rights, people don't just run away and say the lawyer is going to sue me or screw me up and things like that, that we are part of the same conversation. If you don't know the value of what you have, if you're not educated and trained to know the value of what you have, you'll never maximize it. And I think that's my call, that we have to really build capacity around Nagoya, access benefit sharing, intellectual property rights, so that people can negotiate these things from solid understanding. We talk about data, don't give your data to somebody because they're going to use it. If you keep it yourself, you're not going to do it. Data is good. It's even better when you share and maximize on the power of data. We have paper published showing that you can get data set from Brazil, from South Africa, from Australia, and use that to make very much better decision. The final one, number 10, is really advocacy for the platform. We're all convinced that AABNet is a strong platform. How do we advocate it? How do we get people to see the value and things like that? So on this point, I want to make all of us ambassadors of the AABNet platform. So when we leave this room with 1 or 2 things that you can say about AABNet, I think is really important. To close up, our colleagues from Egerton University, they have prepared very good materials here that you can take with you. There are QR codes on some of them. Get people to know what AABNet is. People are not going to come to AABNet because they have solution. They can come with the right question, the right challenge for AABNet to be really a service provider. So thank you so much, Chichi. Thank you everybody online for this session. It's been great. But it's not the end, it's the start of a conversation about how we can get genetic improvement to transform the livestock sector in the global south. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We'll give one more clap, and then for yourselves, also for defying the rain and being in the room with us this morning, and also for our presenters, and just the wonderful discussion we've had this morning. And before we do that, this discussion will continue later in the day. This time with cocktail, and I was told to add with fine wine. I was told to add that part, so it will continue in the evening at 6 o'clock, 6:30. Okay, so please come and join us. And at that point, there'll be cocktail, and I was told to add fine wine, okay? So close, and we'll give a clap, and you do it with me as I raise my hand. It's called the locomotive clap. As I raise my hand, you clap, and as I put it down, go with the tempo of my hand, okay? So let's appreciate ourselves, and we'll clap as I raise my hand. No, as I raise my hand. No, as I raise, you clap 1, and I bring down, you clap. Just go with my tempo, okay? No, 1, that's 1 clap. We're gonna get it right, okay? Awesome. Thank you very much. Now enjoy your tea. Oh, and the photo now, yes. So how are we going to have it here in front? Quickly, okay. Yeah, please, those online so we can capture you. Please turn your cameras on.